thank you all for showing us tonight. This promises to be fun and informative and hopefully exhilarating and interesting experience. You'll get excited about some of the projects. So, of course, Lori Marino is our featured speaker tonight. And I met Lori a couple of years ago at the Compassionate Conservation Conference in Vancouver, where the idea for the whale sanctuary project was actually hatched. And ever since I've learned about this project, I've been hoping that we'll be able to get Lori to come speak. And I think it's fitting that we have her here in Vancouver, because I think that there's probably no other place on Earth that's debated the topic of whales in captivity more and more intensely than we have here in Vancouver. I'm sure many of you know and have been involved in some of that discussion. I think there's a reason for that, and I think a lot of the reason that we debate this so intensely here in Vancouver is that we share space with these whales. They're right outside our front door, our back door. They're part of our environment. They're part of where we live. So they're hard to get away from. I think anybody, whether you're in favor of captivity or against it, I think one of the things both sides have in common is that there's a connection with these whales. And this is why I'm so pleased that we have Chief Bob Chamberlain here to speak to us tonight as well. Because this is a connection that, it's not something that happened when whales started being kept in captivity. This connection with whales has been going on for centuries, for years. It predates settlers here. The first peoples had this same connection. And I think we lost that for a long time, and we're finally starting to get it back again. So I think it's, this is very timely that this project is coming up and this talk is here. Just so I get a sense of everybody, so how many people in the audience would say that they're anti-captivity or against keeping whales in captivity? Hands up. And don't be shy, but how many people would say that don't worry, we didn't get license plates or anything like that. No, but how many people think, are either undecided or think that there is some justification for captivity? Good. Well, no, honestly, I'm really glad that there are a few people here that are, because this is the purpose of tonight. And that, we don't want to just preach and convert it. One of the problems with this whole debate on whales in captivity, I think, is that both sides are like these immovable objects. Nobody wants to, meet in the middle. Nobody wants to admit that, maybe things aren't perfect either way. And yet we've got so much in common. I mean, both sides, it's all about caring for these whales, and it's about that connection. And I think one of the things that's been missing is there's been no middle ground. There's been no way for us to compromise. And I think that's the important thing that we're here to learn about tonight. This is the compromise. This is the way that the two sides can come and meet in the middle, and maybe come up with something where we can both work together and put all the animosity behind it. So, if you are thinking that there's some justification for captivity, I think you're wrong. But I'm glad that you're here, and I hope you learned something tonight. I think we've got a good program, and feel free to ask as many questions as you like. So, that said, I want to kick things off with two of our sponsors. So, Mary Lee Davies, she's the board president of Vancouver Humane Society, and Craig Daniel, the CEO of the BC SPCA. These two organizations are largely responsible for Lori being able to talk to us tonight. So, please come my hand.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for being here. So my name is Mary Lee Davies, and I am indeed the chair of the Vancouver Humane Society. I'm pleased to be standing beside my friend, Craig Daniel, the Chief Executive Officer of the BC SPCA. And in fact, should I use the mic? Sorry. How's that? Is that better? Should I start again? You got it? I'm Mary Lee Davies, President of Vancouver Humane Society. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very pleased to see all of you. Let's stand here. So I'm standing with Craig Monroe, my friend and CEO of the BC SPCA, And I want to begin my very brief remarks by thanking Craig and the BCSBCA on behalf of Vancouver Humane for partnering with us to bring Dr. Lori Marino here this evening. It's an extraordinary opportunity for all of us, and so we're grateful for your support. I also want to acknowledge and thank Dr. Sarah Dubois, who's somewhere. I've seen her, but I can't see her now because I don't have my glasses on, for supporting from a scientific perspective the case against captivity of whales. The Vancouver Humane Society has been a vocal opponent to cetaceans in captivity since its own inception in 1985. Change happens slowly, we all know this. Social change in particular happens very slowly. But on this issue in 2017, I think the tides are beginning to turn. Just as we've seen in the last couple of years, an increasing demand from consumers and retailers to ban cages and crates for animals raised for food, we're now starting to hear rumblings, particularly in Vancouver perhaps, rumblings and questions about why we are keeping these animals in captivity. And I think it's great that we're having the conversation, and I really think there's just one question that we need to ask, and that's why. Why are we keeping these mammoth and extraordinarily intelligent beings in the animal equivalent of a concrete bathtub? Thanks to scientists like Dr. Marino, I think the answer is becoming increasingly clear, not just to those of us in the humane community or so-called extremists, but to members of the general public, that there is no right or humane answer to that question. Science has told us the tanks have to be emptied. It's that simple. So I want to thank Dr. Marino again for being here tonight, sharing her time, and for the very exciting project that she's working on for a whale sanctuary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Lee. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. The BCSBCA is certainly pleased to join with Vancouver Humane Society to co-sponsor this evening's lecture. Our mission at the BCSBCA is to protect and enhance the quality of life for domestic farm and wild animals in British Columbia. And of course, the keeping of marine mammals in captivity falls well within that mission. For more than 2 decades, the BCSBCA has been opposed to the keeping of marine mammals in captivity. But one of the challenges that we faced as an organization, and I think in society as a whole, is what would we do with these amazing animals? Where would they go? And now, for the first time, we have a solution to that. The creation of a seaside sanctuary for orcas and belugas, possibly right here in British Columbia. I must say that I'm incredibly excited about that particular opportunity, and as an organization, we are certainly committed to doing what we can to help make that a reality. So, enough from me. I know I can't wait for the lecture, so thank you so much for the opportunity to present and for everyone coming out this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we should also you guys some thanks for all of the work that both organizations do. See an awful lot of you guys living forward, so it's great. It's great to see. So next we'll have Chief Bob Chamberlain. He's the Vice President of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, come up and speak to you. You know, things come full circle all the time. It's amazing when it happens. But years ago, my son was, I think he was about 2 years old. We went on a whale watching trip near Port Hardy, and it happened to be a special day. They were going over to a First Nations village and picking up the locals and taking them out whale watching and to do some ceremonies, and we got to go along for the ride. And the place was on Guilford Island. And I don't want to mangle the name. I'm bad with all languages. But yeah, so I think it's great to have Chief Bob here to talk to us about some of the importance of whales and salmon in our First Nations. For those of you who don't know, Bob has been an absolutely tireless defender of wild salmon in the province of BC. And of course, this is in issue that is critical to pretty much all of our wildlife up and down the coast. But in particular, it's very important to our orcas and our whales. So it's great to have you here, Bob. Thank you so much for being here too.
Gearlijk as la hamas lo plaatlik. Nu kwam over die guy van haar teruggezoeten op de papmis moestmaakt zouden. Gearlijk as la sleewetooth squatmis musquim la juctamas. Wheatlanding en nanmokolos panala. En we gaan het goed verdachten met water panala. We water in alle gelas en kloekwala majuchana. Gasloopgelaten. Pasa, Zaka, Klualacha. My traditional name is Owadi, and I'm really glad Jeff didn't try to say Kwekwasunti to put Fatmis. A lot of people struggle with that name. And in fairness, a lot of our people struggle with that name as well. I have recognized the unceded territories that we're on of the Tsleil-Waututh, of the Squamish, of the Musqueam peoples. And it's not a small gesture that calls me to do that very act. Because the state of law in Canada today has evolved to the point now where Canada has been given very clear direction from the highest courts of this land, reflecting, of course, what is found in the Constitution of this great country. And it's about the recognition of our First Nations people, proper and appropriate place within this context of this country called Canada. And so I must recognize that because I have family and friends that are from each of these nations. And I'm always very mindful of watching for my family ties so I can conduct myself towards the peoples in the respectful manner in which each of us turns to our family. But to speak in my opening remarks in our language of Pakwala, I recognize the very special place of Orca. Machin in our language. And I mentioned Pasa, I mentioned the Zeka, and I mentioned Lualacha. And the Pasa is what a lot of people like to refer to as the potlatch. And within the potlatch there are two very distinct components. One is the Zeka, which is the cedar bark ceremony. And the other is Lualacha, which is the peace dance component. And you'll find that I refer to them as a glugwala and as a nawala. Because when creatures and entities are in the spirit realm, there are glugwala. And when they make their way into our world, into our realm, to be on our dance floor within our culture, they become a nawala, something that you can actually see and experience. And of course, what they represent is a reflection of what we understand of our relationship with the lands, every single component. The government wants each of us to take a look at one item at a time and pretend that they don't rely upon another component. If we just cut all these trees down, we still have these ones over there. If we get rid of all these fish, it's just the fish, it's not the whales. And what we're witnessing globally, and I have every confidence it's found within the hearts of everybody that's gathered here tonight, is an awakening, a recognition of this planet as a living being, a recognition that there are some integral components. It's hard to imagine one that's not integral, to be honest, because we all experience nature in its perfect form, because we've seen so many times that it's flawless in how it interacts, how one system of nutrients or one system of animals supports another, how it supports the fauna, and how it supports the environment in general. And when man woke up, I guess they woke up in England first, about turning environment into dollars, and they lost control. And the greed that's found within man flourished. And then we experienced the sun never setting on the British Empire. And so this aggressive hunger for resources at all costs, an aggressive pursuit of the gathering of wealth amongst very distinct smaller circles of people at the expense of the planet. But we're seeing an awakening around the world today. We're seeing an understanding now that the impacts of that pursuit of economy is unsustainable. And we're now experiencing it in ways which are utterly undeniable. We see it on the news. We see what's going on up in the interior. We see what's going on with the flooding, with the global warming, with the ice shelves breaking off from the Antarctic, and so on and so on. It's become an undeniable fact. And found within that fact is the struggle to look after the things which rely upon the environment, and which we are the sole peoples of this planet that can ruin it. Because nature being perfect lives in balance and harmony, where they coexist, support, and flourish. And yet we decide that we know what's best, and we reach in and start tinkering with things. Thinking something is beautiful, I was going to say as the whale, but the pigs are pretty beautiful. In our language, that's Wasu. But to take something as wonderful as an orca and develop a rationale that we're going to study it in a bathtub just defies any kind of logic in my mind in our people's mind. But to speak about the connection that our First Nations have with the Machino, with the orca whale and the whales and the salmon, and as Jeff has mentioned, I've been very adamant about the protection of wild salmon, period. I'm not too interested in finding some wiggle room for industry to destroy habitat or have direct impact on something that has sustained our people since the beginning of time. I've been fortunate to travel around the world a little bit. And I've always told people the same thing, and I'm going to tell you right now about our people as Wuskamak-Tzawadin. We're clam diggers and we're fish eaters. We're extremely proud of both of them. That's who we are. Come into our territories, you see these beaches that you might mistake from a distance as sandy white beaches. And as you get closer, your anthropologists would call them middens. We call them kabilis, which is a broken clamshell beach. It's probably about 30 feet deep. But it's a way to recognize just how deeply we are intertwined with the environment, with the resources that are there, and how we flourish and develop a really dynamic culture, which is extremely vibrant, to the degree that we struggle with humility on many days. That was a joke. But I found it rather amazing to get the invite to come and share with you a little bit about my understanding of First Nations, and the whale. And then I remembered, it was probably about 8-9 years ago, when my Uncle Charles, he had a potlatch for our family, the Sa. And it's a really interesting dynamic, the way that we look at wealth as First Nations people in the historical context. Of course, Western man, they want you to see their nice car, and the boat, and the bank account, and the real estate. The more one person has, the more successful they are. And don't get me wrong, I like big TVs just as much as the rest of you. But the basis and understanding of our people's culture, the wealthy man has given it all away. The wealthy man amongst our culture has provided for his people. He has wrapped himself in the responsibilities of our culture, and invited all the tribes, all the distant family connections to come and celebrate an event. And then he pays you so you can remember what it was that you were brought together for. And when we have potlatches, we have stories of origin. And when I got involved in our culture as a singer probably 20, 25 years ago, it wasn't that long as it should. It's funny when you're able to start talking in decades, you start to realize you're not that young anymore. But I was very fortunate to have some very really knowledgeable elders come into my life and speak to me about our origin stories and the entities that they represent and how they're tied to territorial authority. And so the identity of our people. And a lot of people like to think of our groupings as clans or houses and stuff. Ours is a Namima, which is a component of a tribe. And each Namima has an attachment and an origin story and a crest. And there's certain obligations that come with that. And So on the evening that I got given the name Owadi to carry, my uncle took it upon himself to have me dance in this blanket. So this represents a crest of my family. This represents the spiritual entity, the Glutwala that I was speaking about earlier. This crest represents the celebration of our people and the bringing together of our family to recognize our close family, our Namyu, and our distant family, the Gliglaklola. So I wanted to share this with you so you could see when I talk about our culture, when I talk about the whales, when I talk about the environment, when I talk about our people's attachment to the lands, that you can see and witness for yourselves. I'm speaking the truth of my family. And it is something that's so incredibly valuable to all of us. As we've learned through different exercises of Canada's democracy, the experience of Indian residential schools, the direct attack on First Nations people, culture, language, children, old Canada. As we learn about the environment and the way that we need to view it differently than we have in past generations, so do we also have to re-envision a relationship with First Nations people in Canada. I've been very fortunate, unfortunate if you like, that I've now just been elected for my 7th two-year term for our First Nation, and my 3rd term as Vice President of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. And I'm quite disappointed in the government, I'm quite disappointed in industry, and even with the highest courts of this land, within the constitutional democracy of Canada, the government still ignores its own laws. And so I want everyone here to understand, when you see a First Nation on a roadblock or in the courts protesting, I want you to understand that we're fighting the government so that they can live up to their very own laws. And that is why I never turn down an opportunity to come meet as many wonderful people as you, so we can start to understand one another better. So us as politicians, as we fight the government for a measure of reconciliation, the settlement of the land question, and our rights and our title, and access to economy and benefits. In that struggle, I've realized that it's slower than a glacier. Well, maybe not so much now because of global warming, but it's slow. And then I started to question, how can we speed this up? And that's why I'm here. Reconciliation between Canada and First Nations people begins with me. It begins with you. And it begins with us having conversations and recognizing ourselves as human beings with the same care for our children, and the same care for our families, and to realize there's a lot more that binds us together than has us stand apart from one another. And on behalf of Reconciliation Canada, I want to invite everybody here to visit reconciliationcanada.ca. And I want you all to sign up yourselves, your family. Who's got cousins? I always think just Indians got lots of cousins. It makes dating really difficult at times. But I want to encourage everybody to find their way to that website. And I want you to register for the Reconciliation Walk on September 24th. There's been one, there were 70,000 people there. Now I'd love to see 100,000. I'd love to see more. And I'd love to see Canadians really understand this country and really understand what's happened to First Nations people. Let's build bridges. Let's seek to understand one another and support each other so we can truly make this country what it was intended to be. And I really encourage you to wear your glasses. I have to tell this story. When you said that, I thought, oh no, like I get a gerbil on the wheel and I have to say it. So these are bifocals. These are not my first pair of bifocals. I can remember walking through the Vancouver Native Friendship Center quite a number of years ago, actually. And this very attractive lady came walking out of one of the rooms in the hallway. She said, "Hey, Bob." Big smile on my face. I said, "Hi," and I took another step. She looked kind of familiar. And I took another step, it was my ex-wife. So, off to the optometrist, I went the next week. And he said to me, he says, "Bob, you don't need bifocals now, you'll need them next time." I said, "Buddy, give them to me now." But it's funny how life goes. And I love humor. It's a way that brings us together, brings our hearts together. And I have a joke I want to tell you, too, actually, sorry. I'm sorry, Jeff, I know I'm probably past 15 minutes. 2 jokes. What kind of tea did the American colonies want? Liberty. If you think that one's bad. What do you call a fish with one eye missing?
What?
One eye missing. I know, ever sick, right? But I know also that you're going to tell somebody those very same jokes. So again, reconciliation.ca, please sign up for the walk, bring your family, bring the people you work with. Let's start this thing called reconciliation amongst me, amongst you, your family, my family. And we can find that common purpose. And in that common purpose, we can look after whales, we can look after the environment, we can look after salmon together. And also, don't forget the wonderful people that hosted this evening tonight. They need your help. They need your money. I brought some money. I have $25 over and above the ticket price. And I want to ask everybody to do the same, because this work needs to continue. To have us gather in such places, to have dialogue like we're having, and so we can really find that momentum. So we can bring our neighbors, our family, and our friends to the next one. And the next one will get bigger, and the next one will get bigger. And we can start to drive societal change like it really is crying out for. And I think we can do that. The other guys will how much we'll look at.
Man's always a hard act to follow. Sorry, Lori. No, I've always believed there's a lot of wisdom that we can learn from in traditional knowledge, but there's also a lot of wisdom that comes from the man as well. And thank you again, Bob. And really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. And I think what you said about reconciliation is really it's very important that it starts here, because it's definitely not starting with the government, and it's got to be a grassroots thing. So because I don't have anything nearly as wise to say, we'll just move on to our featured speaker, Laurie Marino. So those of you who aren't familiar with Laurie, you know that she's a neuroscientist by training. She spent several years at Emory University. Laurie was the first person to show evidence, or serious evidence, convincing evidence even, of self-awareness in bottlenose dolphins. I think that's pretty special. That's one of those kind of scientific discoveries I think that every scientist sort of hopes one day to make, and very few actually do. So she's had a wonderful career, and now we get the benefit of Laurie's knowledge and expertise and hard work towards something that is, I think, incredibly meaningful, and that's to make the lives of whales just a little bit better. Not perfect, but just a little bit better, and I think that's all we can ask from anyone. So it's with great pleasure that we welcome Dr. Laurie Marino.
Jeff is tall. Thank you so much to everyone for coming. I'm overwhelmed with the turnout and with the company. I want to thank the organizers. It's really a great honor to be here to talk to you about our project. Chief Bob, there's nothing I can say except that what we're here tonight to talk about is reconciliation, and reconciliation with each other, reconciliation with nature. I mean, that's really what we want to have happen. That's why we have the Whale Sanctuary Project that I'm going to tell you about. It's about righting the wrong. It's about giving back. It's about restitution. And so I want to thank everyone. I want to give a special shout out to two members of our team, Mr. Charles Vinnick, our Executive Director, and Sarah Dubois, who has been on the advisory committee for the Whale Sanctuary Project from the beginning. And where are you aiming so I can put it? Okay, so tonight, I want to ask some questions and pose some responses. The questions are, who are orcas? Who are killer whales? And why can't they thrive in marine parks? It presupposes that we already know that they don't, and I think that's the case. Who are they? Why can't they live in concrete tanks? And then finally, what should we do about it? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about orcas. Orcas or killer whales are essentially very large, very smart, and very long-lived dolphins. They're members of the dolphin family. They're the largest members of the Delphinidae dolphins. And this gives you an idea of the scale of the size of this creature. Their average lifespan in the wild is about 30 years for males, 50 years for females, but they can live much longer. Males to 60 years and females over 100 years. They are intelligent, they are self-aware, and they are cognitively complex. This is an example of a killer whale or orca brain next to a human brain. Now, of course, their brains are bigger than ours because their bodies are bigger than ours, but the important thing to note is that that brain is about 2.3, 2.5 times the size you would expect for their body, meaning that they are swimming around in the ocean with a much bigger brain than they really need to have as an average mammal. And yet, like us, they have extraordinarily large, oversized brains. Their brains, their neocortex, the part of their brain that's involved in cognition and thinking, has even more elaborated surface area than the human brain. And they even have a part of the brain called the paralimbic lobe that humans do not possess. So if you're just looking at this from a scientific point of view, and I study neuroanatomy, we have a large brain, we have an incredibly complex brain, and when you look at that brain, you say to yourself, well, no wonder that brain can't live in a concrete tank. So go back and take a look at the orca brain and the complexity and the elaboration, and compare that with the kind of environmental enrichment that they have in concrete tanks. And tell me if you think that brain can be satisfied in that environment. This is Lolita. She lives in the Miami Aquarium in the States. And she is looking at a blow-up version of herself, which they give her for environmental enrichment. Now, orcas live in strong, bonded, complex social networks. They are shaped by deep-seated cultural traditions. Sounds like us, right? Their cultural traditions span different dialects, different foraging capacities, different ways of greeting each other, different ways of mating and reproducing and carrying on their lineage. They are capable of cooperative hunting. They can cooperate and sort of develop a plan and execute that plan. They are known to develop quite complex alliances. I'm from New York. In New York, they call those gangs. And that's an orchid gang that you see. How do we know it's an orchid gang? Because look at how they're lined up. They're in synchrony. And cetaceans swim and align themselves in formation and in synchrony when they want to make it clear to everyone, hey, we're tight, you know? So they'll be diving together and surfacing together, diving and surfacing. That's an orca gang. And it takes a lot of intelligence to actually form that kind of gang. They resource partition. In other words, if they live in the same place, they don't compete with each other for food. They make a pact with each other. You do mammals, I'll do fish. And we can live in the same area and not compete. We see this in the Salish Sea with the transient orcas and the southern resident orcas. They have lifelong social bonds. For many of the populations, the males stay with their mom their entire life. They are the ultimate mama's boys, okay? And if something happens to mom, that male may go into a depression and die. It has happened. That's how strong their family bonds are. They're matrilineal. That's how they pass on their tradition. And they are one of the few mammals that have menopause. So we've got grandmas out there passing on cultural tradition to helping their daughters and their granddaughters to do the same. They form complex social networks, they have dynamic relationships, they have social roles, and they are extraordinarily acoustic. Here's an example. This is a greeting ceremony in which some pods of whales are coming together. They haven't seen each other for a while. They're coming together and they're greeting each other. They're not just going to mingle, they need to greet each other formally before they are allowed to mingle. The grandmas of each of the matriline calls the shots. She decides who hangs out with who dates who, the mama's boys. who gets to greet who, it's matrilineal. This is a pod of Antarctic orcas preparing to wave wash an unfortunate seal who's on an ice floe, but these orcas know that if they line up in a straight line, somebody gives a signal and they rush towards the floe, they can knock the seal off into the water, and there's always a one who's waiting with an open mouth on the other side of the floe. They coordinate all of this, and it doesn't work unless they all are in on the plan. And here's a mother orca teaching her child to hunt seals on the shore, which people have seen. Think about all that complexity. Think about all that family time and bonding and challenge. And then think about Kiska, who is an orca living at Marineland, Canada, who basically has had no companions for the past 6 years. She's alone. Not only is she alone, there's nothing in her tank at all. She just circles round and round and round. She's had 5 children. All 5 she's witnessed perish. The thing about these beings is they need, they want, they like, use whatever adjective you want. They need to swim far and they need to dive deep. They can dive to depths of well over 200 meters. They travel over 100 miles a day. That's what they need to do, like to do, want to do. Here's a picture of some wild orcas in Jonesville Strait that were taken by someone we met with on our trip here to BC just a couple of days ago. And this is what it looks like to be an orca. Traveling with your friends and with your family. Now this is an interesting diagram. Let's see if I can do this. Well, okay. So what this is, no, okay. So maybe I just should not push any buttons. What this is a graph, a diagram, made from real data, where somebody followed one individual killer whale from the southern residents in the Salem Sea, and they documented how they dove over several, one bout of diving. You can see the maximum dive depth is 525 feet. So that's the trail of an actual individual orca during one trip. Origin. And if you look at the top there, right here in the circle, you see a little tiny square and there's a little dot in it. That little dot represents telecom or any orca and the tanks that they are forced to live in. Okay? And you put that little square next to the rest of that, and you have an idea of how constricted their movements are. There's Telecom on the upper left in his tank at SeaWorld Orlando when he was alive, passed away now. And you can see him stuck in a tank where from tail to rostrum, he touches both sides. It's so shallow that he would not be able to dive one body length. On the bottom right is Lolita in her tank at Miami Aquarium. She's been in that tank for decades. She's the one that has the blubber got 2 white-sided dolphins that occasionally come in and keep her company. Yet, we know exactly where her family is. In fact, we know her mom. We know where her mom and her family are at this very moment, but she's there. This is a diagram of SeaWorld San Diego showing the size of the tanks that they have provided for these magnificent beings versus their parking lot. Okay, I think that says it all. An orca at SeaWorld would have to swim the circumference of the main pool 1,400 times to match the equivalent daily distance traveled in a month. There is a fundamental mismatch between what orcas need to thrive and the conditions of living in marine parks and aquariums. And that's an example of a marine park there, just yards from the ocean. So what happens because of this mismatch? Well, you see the evidence all around you. You see the evidence in how the animals live, the kinds of illnesses they get, how long they live, the kinds of behaviors that they demonstrate. Most captive orcas do not live past the age of 20. Okay? You saw that the average for even males was 30. Of all wild-caught orcas, over half have died after only 4 years. Now, I want to tell you that we're talking about orcas here, but I could just as easily be talking about beluga whales. They do very poorly in captivity. In fact, I could be talking about any cetacean. There is something about being a cetacean, a dolphin or a whale, that just doesn't go with being in a concrete tank. For orcas and beluga whales, that situation is especially bad, especially bad. They suffer from all kinds of infections. They show behavioral abnormalities, hyperaggression, and all kinds of stress-related conditions. If you go and you see them going around and around and around and around the tank, that's a stereotypy. And it's something that all animals show, including humans, when they are under a great deal of stress and they become emotionally disturbed. It's just something they do that indicates that something is psychologically very wrong. Now, before I talk about the Sanctuary Project, I want to acknowledge a couple of milestones in the history that led up to this. And there are many. I mean, there are many. I'll just mention 2. One is the Free Willy Keiko Foundation, which was founded in 1995. After the talk, you can certainly talk to Charles, our executive director, about that because he was the project manager. And that was an example of people becoming aware that, wait a minute, these animals don't belong there in concrete tanks. They really do belong in the ocean. The other is the film Blackfish. How many of you have seen it? Oh my gosh, everybody. Okay, great. More recent, 2013. It captured public attention. It detailed the injuries and the deaths both to the whales and to the trainers. And keeping them in concrete tanks does, okay? It doesn't work. It's a square peg in a round hole. And Blackfish was pivotal in giving momentum to the movement to say, we want these animals out of the concrete tanks. We want them out of the performances and the circus acts and the shows. And here we are in 2017, and this film continues to drive a lot of the public's awareness about the plight of orcas. So, I've just told you how bad it is in captivity in concrete tanks for orcas, but what's the alternative? Well, there are permanent sanctuaries for all kinds of large mammals. We know this: elephants, tigers, lions, bears, chimpanzees, all kinds of land mammals, all kinds of wildlife. There aren't enough, but they're certainly there, and many of them do a brilliant job at providing a permanent home for wildlife that has been exploited. But yet, today, there's not a single permanent sanctuary for dolphins or whales on the planet. And this is what the Whale Sanctuary Project hopes to change. Our mission is to create a permanent seaside sanctuary where cetaceans can live in an environment that maximizes their well-being and their autonomy and is as close as possible to their natural habitat. Is it living in the wild? No. Is it orders of magnitude better than living in a concrete tank and doing tricks? Yes. What is a sanctuary? Because a lot of people ask, well, how is a sanctuary different from a zoo or an aquarium? It's different. And the difference that makes a difference is in the priorities. A sanctuary is a place of refuge. It's a place where these animals can live out their lives with dignity. Wildlife sanctuaries do not breed. The last thing we want to do is create more captive animals. So if you go somewhere and they say we're a sanctuary and we're breeding, they're not a sanctuary. They're a zoo or an aquarium or a marine park. No exploitation for commercial purposes, okay? Sanctuary is about the animals, it's not about the people. And a true sanctuary respects the integrity of individual animals. It provides a safe refuge for them and is designed for the needs of each individual animal. Here's another question that we get asked a lot. Why not just release them all? In fact, we're criticized quite often for even wanting to build a permanent sanctuary. You know, why don't you just get them out of the concrete tanks, put them back in the ocean? Well, first of all, most of the animals, if not all of the animals in concrete tanks now would not survive in the ocean. They don't have the skills. These are cultural beings. I mean, they would know more have the skills to survive than you would if you grew up in a closet and then were thrust out into human society. They wouldn't even know how to feed themselves. They don't even know what a live fish is. They've been fed dead fish their whole lives. But we're not excluding the possibility that some individuals might be candidates for rehab and some kind of release, but it has to be taken on a case-by-case basis. So we are the conservative ones. We're the ones that say we have got to do everything according to best scientific practice. And we're going to put the needs and the risks to the animals ahead of what we would all like to see, which is all of them living free in the ocean. Here's a sort of a synopsis of our concept. That's a concept drawing of what we want to do. We want to create a cold water natural environment. And I'm trying to take this off. Here we go, thanks. So we want to create a cold water natural environment for about 5 to 8 orcas and or beluga whales. We're concentrating on cold water species, okay? So it doesn't have to be just orcas and beluga whales. It could be any other cetacean species endemic to cold water. We are not going to do a sea pen or a sea cage or anything like that. What we're looking for is a cove or a bay or something of that magnitude that we can net off and create a habitat that's continuous with the wild habitat for these animals. We will do rescue and rehabilitation of wild stranded individuals. So we'll serve that purpose as well. We will be a world-class scientific and veterinary facility. We're going to do everything according to the gold standard. We'll be a bridge to conservation issues. And I think this is really important because this isn't just about the few individuals who get to live here. It is about public outreach. It's about people understanding why those individuals are in here to begin with and why the wild orcas need to be protected and the whole environment needs to be protected. We are going to do authentic, interactive public education, which I find very exciting because as an educator for many years, there's so much that we can do with the technology now to bring a connection to orcas, to people. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And we want to be transparent. We want to share information. We're not looking to get any fame or fortune of being the first ones or this or that. We want to do this right, and then we hope that other people do it over and over and over again. We have really, I think, a great world-class team of leadership and advisors, a board of directors that really, I don't think can be beat. We just had Dr. Carl Safina come on board. He's a world-renowned conservationist who will help us make that bridge to conservation. And we have, you know, just an incredible group of about 45 advisors. This is just a select few. Dr. Dubois, we've got veterinarians all over the world, really, ex-trainers, marine mammal scientists, people in the industry like Mr. Ron Kagan, who's the director of the Detroit Zoo. We are very inclusive, and we continue to build our team of experts because everybody, there's so much expertise that's needed to do this and do it right that we need a large team. So We want to be the gold standard for sanctuaries. We want to compare ourselves to the best sanctuaries that exist for other animals, like some of the elephant and primate sanctuaries that are out there. We have some of those people on our advising team because we want to know, how do you do this the best way possible? So again, we want to build something that's permanent, that provides lifetime care, that provides cutting-edge public education and outreach, no performances, no breeding, and no invasive research. Here's a colorful slide showing some of the cool things that we can do for education and outreach. I just think it's critically important that this becomes a way to promote awareness about the environment, about these animals, and to shift our relationship to them. So that's why the public education, the public outreach is a critical component of this. We will have an on-site visitor center. We will have some visitor tours. They'll be able to see the animals, but from a distance. We want to have contacts with academia and have veterinary internship programs, communal outreach for young kids, and utilize virtual reality displays and a lot of the technology that exists now to bring people together with the whales. And by that I mean taking the sounds that the whales make, for instance, and sending them out to people and places like SeaWorld and places like that, and providing an experience of these animals in places of that nature. Classrooms, all kinds of really interesting, cutting-edge stuff that we can do together. We have a whole list of site criteria, and I'm not going to bore you by going through the entire list, but you can see from the size of the list that we are being very conservative, very careful, and very scientific about where we put the sanctuary. And we are in the process of site selection right now that we hope to complete by the end of the year. And that site selection criteria has kind of different levels. Of course, there's the component of the environment. What kind of environment will orcas and belugas be able to live in? What's the temperature and the salinity range? What's healthy, for them and the surrounding environment? Is there good flushing throughout? But in addition to that is the human component. First Nations consultation has been at the top of our list to make sure that what we're trying to do is something that's adopted by the people, not just tolerated. Stakeholder engagement is another one. So we really want this to be the kind of project that wherever it ends up is embraced by the community. And we have been looking on the East Coast in Nova Scotia. We've had 2 field trips out there. And on the West Coast, we're looking in Washington State and British Columbia. And we have a 3-phase plan here. And the reason we're doing this is so that at the earliest date possible, we can be ready to receive the first animals. Okay, so the first phase prioritizes the development of the infrastructure and the animal enclosures and the veterinary facilities so that we can care for the animals and have security as well. Second phase is administration, more staff, housing, dining, and the third phase will be education programs and the visitor center programs. And this just gives you an idea of some of the milestones that have occurred. As I mentioned, we've only really been in existence for a short while, since April of 2016. That's when we incorporated, and we were fortunate to start off with an initial major donor, Munchkin Corporation, which is a California-based baby company, who pledged over $1 million to us to do this. And they have continued to be a supporter of the project. In August, we began site surveying and strategic planning. In February, we completed the strategic and financial plans, and we developed a short list of sites based upon the data that we can gather from things like Google Earth. In April, we received another grant from Munchkin for $300K, the challenge grant, and we began site visits to Washington and DC. And by December 2017, we plan to end that site selection phase and be able to talk a little bit more about where the site will be, where the sanctuary will be. I know everybody's waiting for that, but we really want to be, very sure before we make an announcement. There's a lot that goes into it. And from there on, we start the procurement process. And we want to open the sanctuary with the first residents by 2019. It's a very ambitious timeline. It's right around the corner, but if we keep getting the funding we need, and if we continue at the rate that we're going, we will get there. So that's what I want to say about what we're doing, why we're doing it. I'm so grateful that all of you are here to listen. I invite you to learn more, join us. Go to our website, go to social media. I answer all the questions on social media personally. So if any questions, or any problems or concerns or anything, you should definitely get in touch with us and learn more about our project. And I thank you very much for being here.
So we're going to spend some time here answering your questions, Maurice. They'll talk about anything. I'm sure that there's lots of questions, lots of pieces that people are thinking about that maybe they're not sure of. I can kick it off. One of the things I noticed, having been involved in all the antique activity, protests, and such over the years, one of the things we've heard in Vancouver when we talk about, maybe move the whales to a sanctuary environment, they say, well, if you look at the plan, they've got a visitor center, and they, probably have a gift shop, and they're going to have interpretive programs and interns and things like that. Basically, they're just recreating. It's another aquarium. So, what do you say to that kind of criticism?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer to that is quite simple, actually. It's not about what it looks like or whether you have a gift shop or not. It's about your model. It's about your business model, your priorities, if you will. In a zoo or an aquarium, priority, even among the most well-intentioned people, cannot be the well-being of the animals. It's the visitor experience, it is ticket sales, and the well-being of the animals sort of fits in there. in a sanctuary, a true sanctuary, the well-being of the animals is a priority. Everything else fits around that. And that is the difference that makes a difference.
I think space. Room to move, too.
Well, there's room to move and giving them a more natural environment, but just from the point of view, speaking conceptually, the difference is, speaking conceptually, of course, that's the idea, is that if you're prioritizing the well-being of these animals, then you're going to be all about giving to them what they need to thrive. And that's what happens at an authentic sanctuary.
So anyone else have a question? We only have one microphone,
Yeah.
so you'll have to speak up if you want.
I just wondered, how have we decided, like, some of the whales that are already in captivity, some that are considered to be in the sanctuary?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion about who will be in the sanctuary, and we haven't built this, we're not building the sanctuary or creating the plans for it for one particular individual. We're trying to develop something here that gives us the opportunity to serve a number of possible candidate whales that might come in and live at the sanctuary. We're nowhere near the point where we can say, well, we're building this for so-and-so, we're building that for so-and-so. That answers your question.
But I, the whales go into the sanctuary and they're not releasable.
The decisions about who's releasable, who gets to go into the sanctuary, those are complex decisions. They're made by a team of people who have the interests of the individual whales as a priority. We hope that by the time we get to making those decisions, that we are working with people who really know the animals. And I mean people at aquariums, marine parks, the sea worlds of the world. We want to collaborate with them because they know the animals that they have in their parks. We want to work with we need to work with their trainers, their veterinarians, people who have had experience with the animals. The decision will be made according to the best scientific practice. In other words, it's not going to be who wants so-and-so. It's going to be who are the best candidates so that we set the project up and the whales up for success. And that involves health assessments, behavioral assessments, looking at age and history, and just a variety of variables to see who might be able to make this transition.
How willing are SeaWorlds of the world willing to give up their money?
Well, they're not very willing right now. But, you know, times are changing, as they say. They know it, we know it. And we hope that at some point they will come to the table. We have never, this is not about closing down these facilities. It's not about, you know, doing harm to any of these facilities. It is about providing an alternative to them. And I think that a lot of people in these facilities know that this is the alternative for the future. And we want to talk to them. We want to work with them.
How many are we talking about globally? Orcas, belugas, are there?
Well,
in captivity?
yeah, orcas are about 59 in captivity around the world, about 26 here in North America. Belugas, we're talking in hundreds. I mean, Marineland Canada has 45, 50 beluga whales just there at one facility. Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I mean, that's part of our strategic and financial plan. I'm going to ask Charles to come up and answer your question.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was about the economics, the financing of a project like this. What's perhaps the annual operating budget? What are the capital costs of doing something of this nature? That's your question? Okay. So, it depends a great deal on where it is. Because think about for a moment if we have to provide all of the housing year-round for staffing, all of that, no one is coming from home at night to work in the morning, they're all living there over time. So there are a number of variables. But put that aside for a moment, just deal generally with your question. So you're talking millions of dollars for the capital costs of doing something like this. Perhaps equivalent to some of the capital costs that have been talked about for expanding a marine park. Same kind of thing. Your operating costs on an annualized basis, probably similar to the operating costs for a team of people of animal care specialists, trainers, veterinarians, security people and the like, for a marine park. In our case, if we're talking, as Lori has been, of 65 to 100 acres as our water space for the first sanctuary, 3, 5, 7 animals, we're talking a couple of $1 million a year in operating costs. This is a big project. It takes a village, all of you and all of us to do it. But is it doable? Of course. It's just as doable as what's happening now in these parks. And so we have to be able to translate that and communicate that to corporations, to donors, to others, because it will be a philanthropic effort to carry it forward.
Thank you, Charles. All the way up there.
I just had a question about the site selection. I know you don't have details yet, but the criteria are very stringent. I was just curious what your confidence is. Are there many options, or is it kind of slim pickings at this point?
No, I wouldn't say it's slim pickings. The question is about site selection. How many sites are there out there that are candidates? There are quite a few. And we have narrowed the search down from over 100 sites to about 20 that we're really looking closely at. And we're discovering new sites and refining that list every day. So there are, there are sites out there that meet those criteria. And the question will be, which is the best one when you put all of the factors into the mix? And we'll have to make that decision soon. Good question.
I saw that in particular with the site selection requirements, there's that 50-meter minimum depth.
Yeah. Yes.
In your site survey so far, what is the maximum depth that you've seen roughly?
Oh, gosh. We have seen maximum depths of well over, I think it was well over 100 meters. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are, again, a couple ways to look at that average. One of the things you have to do is be able to net off parts of it, although the rendering on the slide shows it as one big cove. Of course, you would have to divide that for certain animals. But at the entrance, you've got to put a barrier net that secures the animals on the inside from whatever critters are on the outside. So at that mouth of the cove, you'd really like that to be around 15 meters, 20 meters. Why? Part of it's cost and being able to do it and being able to secure it and make sure it stays there. You've got it on each side of the cove, you've got it secured in place, anchored in place. In Iceland with Keiko, we were, I think the opening of our bay was probably 300 meters. It was 30 feet deep, and it was held in place by 10,000-pound anchors every few meters across. That's the kind of infrastructure you have to be prepared to build for something like this. So some of the depth at the mouth deals with the economics of it and the feasibility of it, and you'd like a variety of depths and a variety of surfaces on the inside for the enrichment of the animals as well.
Yes. Yes.
So you mentioned several times that orca live within a culture of a family, and like they are taught by their mothers and so on. So
Yes.
how do you expect them to live with new individuals that they've never lived with, that come from different places, and if themselves have never been in a wild environment?
Well, that's a very good question. Question of, if they're such cultural beings, then how are they going to live in the sanctuary? Well, first of all, you have to consider where they're coming from. And in, marine parks, very little attention, if any, is paid to family structure, lineage, even genetics. I mean, they crossbreed the animals of all kinds, even cross species. It's not as if we are taking them from an appropriate cultural, social situation and putting them into something really artificial. They're already in an artificial situation. With that said, we will be able to partition animals, so we will not be putting individuals together who don't know each other, who don't get along. And ideally, what you would want is for not one whale from one facility to come in, but for maybe identify a group of 3 or 4 who know each other and are bonded already in the marine park, and bring them all together, because at that point, that's their family, in a sense.
And what about all those that you showed that were by themselves?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the pictures you showed, they were by themselves, right? These orcas in captivity.
Well, there are some orcas in captivity that are by themselves, like Lolita and Kiska. And they would, if they ended up in the sanctuary, they would not be forced to contend with orcas that they didn't know. And again, this whole process is a process of observation and adjustment to what you observe. It's not stagnant, it's dynamic, with the interests of the animals always in mind. So things might change over time for an individual, for instance. We will try to do our very, very best to replicate whatever social capacity we can for them.
What is your biggest challenge? Like, what needs to happen for this to be a reality?
What needs to happen for this to be a reality? We need to get the funding. We just do. We need the funding. And in order to get the funding, we need to have a base of people who support this, who connect us with people who want to support this. We need to finish the site selection and then start the process, the long, complicated process of procuring the site and dealing with government and everyone else who has a stake in this. And also on the other side, talking with the industry, the people that have the whales now, and developing a way to not only talk but collaborate, so that we provide a way for them to move forward in a much more appropriate way for these animals.
Can you give everybody here some examples of what we can do in our daily lives to encourage donors to come and talk to you or to advocate for this idea? Just give us a bunch of ideas.
A bunch of ideas. The bunch of ideas has to do with how can we fundraise, and what are some of the ways that we can all help? Well, apart from, anything that anyone can do on a personal level, is tell people about what we're doing and think about who who might have a passion for this and be able and means to help with this. And we're looking for, donors, personal donors. We're looking for corporations, foundations, organizations, and something that you could do, for instance, is if you know people who really like this idea, have some kind of a party or a gathering at your home and tell people about it and have a fundraiser for us, like what we're doing here tonight. Those kinds of things really, really, really help. Sure.
I was just thinking about, what can each of us do tonight? Well, we have a Facebook page and we have a Twitter account. Each of you have, many of you, I don't know about myself, but each of you have one of those too. And you have different people on yours than we have on ours. But if you can ask all of your contacts to become contacts of ours, then our network grows. And part of our network growing is not only about the money and about what we have to do individually and how we have to get a site and the rest, but it's keeping this movement about moving and providing a sanctuary, moving animals out of captive environments and enabling them to be in a sanctuary is about public opinion. It's about public challenge to what's happening today. That happens through social media. And that's what particularly all of you who are so much younger than me, know how to do. And so that's kind of the help we need to create a wider group of people who are supporting us intellectually, socially, personally, as well as financially.
Yep. Well, how we plan to prevent them from breeding? Well, we will be separating them. There are some ways to deal with reproduction on a chemical basis. There's birth control. And we will just have to take that on a case-by-case basis. Who are they? What's their history? If they've been on birth control before, if they have reproductive age, and all of that.
Why?
Yes. That will be really difficult. Sure. Well, yeah, that's a good question. We're not gonna really separate anybody who's together. We are going to, well, breeding may happen, but again, there are ways to prevent that through birth control. Is it? Well, right, but the point is that the last thing we want to do is create more animals who are in captivity. And the kind of question that you are posing is the kind of question that we will ask ourselves as we discuss who is a good candidate, what's a good group. That's part of it. But again, we are not, as a sanctuary, we cannot breed. We cannot allow the animals to breed because essentially then you are doing exactly what's done in marine parks and aquariums and perpetuating more and more animals being born into captivity. We're not saying that a sanctuary is ideal. It's still captivity. What we're saying is this is an alternative to living in concrete tanks We are still going to have to provision them. We are still going to have to take medical procedures. We are going to have to work with them to train them on behaviors that allow us to have access to them so we can keep them healthy and safe. That's the reality of it, because these animals have lived in captivity their whole life. We are going to minimize what we ask of them, but we are also going to make sure that they are safe and healthy, and that we don't create a situation where we have more generations growing up in captivity. We want that to phase out. The only way to do that is to end the breeding. That's the hard reality of it.
We don't hear. Can you repeat the question?
Can you?
So there's, we've got about 10 minutes.
Okay,
Here,
so
if we could move to this.
we'll talk about, yes. Yeah. Yes, here. Right, what kinds of risk analysis? We are going to be very, very thorough with that. We're going to be modeling how infectious agents could possibly flow from the wild animals to the residents and back and forth. We're going to choose an environment that has very good flushing so that the animals are kept in a clean environment. And we are bringing on board a number of people who know how to do the types of water quality and other types of assessments that need to be done before we ever make a decision about where to put this. So we can talk later about some of the specifics, but if there is a test or an analysis that needs to be done, we will do it. Well, right, well, so the nets will allow material to flow in and out, but if we choose a site with good flushing, it will keep everything moving in and out. We're not going to have waste build up and that kind of thing. In terms of feeding, it's likely that they will be provisioned with dead fish. They don't know what a live fish is. Now, some of them might be able to get the concept and be transitioned to that, but that's way down the road, and the immediate concern is just to keep them healthy and safe, and make that transition as smooth as possible for them. Well, if we're looking at something that's about, let's round it to 100 acres, we have 5 individuals, then each individual could have an equal proportion of that. Some of the space is going to have to be taken up by medical pools and facilities of that nature. We're going to aim to give as much space and depth to each individual as possible. That's all I can say at this point. Have we had? Well, we haven't had the support of cities so far. If that's what we talk about Vancouver. I mean, we're still in the process of deciding where the site will be, and I think once that decision is made, then things will become a lot more concentrated in a specific region, and that's how we'll move forward. Yes. Yeah, it's a good question. That's a good question. There is something about nets and barriers that dolphins and whales just don't like, and they don't jump over them. They just don't. Even when you're catching them, you know, and they're being slaughtered and hunted and that kind of thing, and you catch them, all you have to do is encircle them with a net, and they won't jump over. And it's something about their psychology. They're afraid.
The Senate of Canada is currently considering Bill S-203, which is a piece of legislation, if passed, would ban captivity execution in Canada.
Yeah.
How does the whale sanctuary project fit in Bill S-203?
Right. So there's a bill S-203, that is being considered now. And we have been closely in touch with Senator Wilford Moore and the other proponents of the bill. And there is an amendment to the bill that will provide a way for us to exist within Canada. So yes, we've got that.
Alan G. Kinder Morgan is coming. What makes it so sure that you think you can save a whale if that danger does happen as a spill?
Someone's
you
gonna
got
have
no
to-
guarantee.
So with Kinder Morgan,
Pardon me? Kinder Morgan, yeah.
although we're gonna sue our best fellows. What happens to
Look at Chief Christy Brown protesting up there.
Yeah.
She won't do anything about saving the salmon. What courage have you got? What political anchor have you got over Ottawa?
Well, what I can say is that that's a question that deals with an issue that a lot of people are much better positioned to deal with than us. We're just trying to build a sanctuary for some whales, and to provide a way to educate people about the importance of the wild populations and the conservation. If things like the Kinder Morgan come to be, you know, we'll have to deal with it, just like everyone else. I hope it doesn't happen. But we don't know yet where we're going to be and how something like that will affect us.
I think we got time for one more.
Okay. Anyone?
Sure.
I was just wondering, along here, about public access to the constructed site. I was wondering, is it a priority for the public to be able to visit this site via from a public road, or are you more interested in a remote location to provide more of a natural environment for the whales themselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
I hate to see it don't think of it large construction.
Yeah, right. So is this going to develop into a large tourist attraction, and are we going to end up Six Flags over Johnstone Strait or something? It's a really, really good question, and part of that will be sort of how the public participates on site will be a function of where we are. And we're taking a lot of factors into account, and we're looking at sites that are more remote than others. And the one thing we know is we have to have a certain amount of infrastructure there. in order to do this. And depending upon its accessibility, we will have people visiting, but in a much less obtrusive way than in a marine park or environment. It'll be something that will, we hope, become part of the environment itself and blend in with the surroundings. And it's really, you know, it's those kinds of things that remain to be seen, because we have to take a lot of factors into account simultaneously. Thank you very much.
Everybody's found that informative, and I think Laurie will be hanging around for a little bit out front as well as Charles. So if you have additional questions, please feel free to approach them. They're very approachable. You know, one of the things that I think that you could probably emphasize a little bit more is that you know, the question about Kinder Morgan, I think, is important, because if we're not able to stop that, the amount of tanker traffic that's coming through Salish Sea is going to ultimately result in more ship strikes and more orcas in need of rehabilitation facilities. Considering the CEO of the Vancouver Aquarium has recently been quoted in the Globe and Mail that he still believes orca captivity is perfectly fine. I think a solution like this is the only thing we've got that really takes into consideration the needs of these whales, and the needs of our local wildlife as well. And so I think that's an incredibly huge contribution to our local, wildlife situation. So I think it would be wonderful to see it here in BC. We can all lobby before you go out. All lobby Charles and Laurie for BC. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and I hope you learned something. I hope you're excited about this, and I hope you'll visit the Whale Sanctuary Project.org, and Bob will also visit Chief Bobby C. or reconciliation.ca, Reconciliation Canada. So that's your homework when you go home. So I'd like to also close this out by extending an apology and doing what I should have done when we first arrived, and that's acknowledging that this is Coast Salish territory. And forgive me for not doing that at the beginning. It's not meant as any disrespect. But thank you again for coming out, and I hope you've enjoyed the evening.
Usually gets me in trouble.